All right. So next we're talking about adult use cannabis that is now legal in New York. It is definitely shorter than the hemp policies because um, they haven't, I guess you'll see that what they have out right now is a conditional cultivator license. And we'll talk about what that is and if you can get one. But beyond that, they don't have any of the applications together yet. So they don't have an application for just like anybody to apply to grow marijuana. I'm not sure if they really have out too much on like the retail and distributor side yet. They do at least have down like the taxes that they're going to charge and that sort of thing. But I don't know. While it's great that it became legal, things in government always take a long time to get through. So there's not quite as much to talk about, but we will talk about what happened when the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act was signed into law for the state, what's in it so far, the changes to, at least what they put on is what the, like a maximum amount of, marijuana to have on your person. If you're beyond that, then it is still like a misdemeanor and things like that. Talk about the social and economic equity of the act. And then again, that conditional cultivator's license. So you may see it spelt either way. If you do go looking into pulling up the actual law, that went to the state. And so you might see marijuana spelt with an H or J. Either one is acceptable. The first one, honestly, like most of the laws, like even back then in like the 70s and 80s with the war on drugs, a lot of law people spelt it with an H, and that could really come from the fact that, again, the name kind of came from Mexico and all of the Mexicans that were bringing up like the real high THC potent marijuana. And so people heard them say marijuana and thought it was with an H. It means the same thing. I'm not trying to like do anything crazy with this, just say that you might find it spelled with an H. I will spell it with a J, but it still says marijuana. So that is the name of the law that was brought to New York State, and that I'm sure it had to go to like the Senate and stuff like that. But anyways, it got signed into law March 2021. So we're coming on to a year now, and we still really don't have a lot of the paperwork, application stuff done yet, but they have at least gotten the positions filled and that sort of thing. So anyways, it legalized adult use cannabis, also known as marijuana, recreational marijuana, by passing the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, or MRTA, MRTA, sometimes I call it that. This legislation creates a new Office of Cannabis Management, or OCM, that is governed by the Cannabis Control Board, or CCB, to oversee and implement the law. The new OCM is created as an independent office within the Division of Alcoholic Beverage Control, similar to how the State Liquor Authority oversees alcohol in New York State. The OCM will regulate cannabis and will issue licenses and develop regulations outlining how and when businesses can participate in the new industry. So yeah, there's the website for our state and the adult use cannabis stuff. But again, you can actually pull up the entire law. You can look at the OCM or the Cannabis Control Board. You can see the people involved with that, but they don't have a whole lot of licenses out yet. They do have all the CBD stuff out. So like we talked about last time, I'm gonna do this. We talked about this last time, that the Office of Cannabis Management, as far as hemp goes, does hemp retail, distributor, and hemp processor licenses. Right, those are all up on the website. Those can be applied for, and there's a list of current people with licenses or permits. This is the one, not quite there yet. Taxes, because they were approved in the law, you can currently see what those are. So again, hemp, any of this hemp stuff is talking about the CBD part of it. So because this new law, Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, consolidated adult use cannabis, medical cannabis, and cannabinoid hemp and hemp extracts. That means CBD. So just because it's new, I didn't put up any of the people that make up ag and markets, but just because it's new, it's kind of interesting to see where some of these people came from. The Cannabis Control Board consists of 5 board members, with 3 that were chosen coming from the governor, 1 from the Senate, and 1 from the Assembly. The chairperson of the board is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. The chairperson receives an annual salary, while the remaining board members are compensated at a rate of $260 per day when performing work of the board. Board members are appointed for 3-year terms, and to the extent possible, must be geographically and demographically representative of New York State and communities historically affected by the war on drugs. Additionally, board members are required to be citizens and residents of New York State. Board members are prohibited from having any interest, whether direct or indirect, in any entity licensed by the Office of Cannabis Management. So the board, obviously kind of being top of the food chain, overlooking what the Office of Cannabis Management does. They do decide upon what's required and registrations, licenses, permits, that sort of thing. The number of permits, the number of licenses to go out, revoking any licenses or suspending them, appoint and hire staff to support the board and the OCM, hold hearings, all of that stuff. But they're also kind of just like the overseer of everything, where the Office of Cannabis Management is, so they might hear from the control board, it needs to have these details in the application. And then the OCM people are what actually puts that application together. And so, obviously they're working closely together, but the control board is kind of the overseer. All right, so not that I expect you to memorize any of these bullets, but I just wanted to put it up there, especially because like a lot of what the Cannabis Control Board does like really overlaps with the Office Cannabis Management. But anyways, things again like making a budget, fiscal matters, developing a minimum criteria for certifying employees to work in the cannabis industry. When it comes to the social and economic equity applicants, we'll talk about that, but they're going to probably be pretty involved with that. Be the final decision maker of the OCM and any matters appealed to the board by a licensee, registrant, or permit holder. Approve price quotas, price controls, enter into compacts. or compacts with the Native American nations and tribes within New York. So pretty much what a board does. These are the 5 board members. You've got Tremaine Wright is the chair of the Cannabis Control Board. It kind of starts at the top. So she's there. Then it goes kind of clockwise. So Ruben, Jessica Garcia, Jen Metzger, and Adam Perry. And then moving on to the Office of Cannabis Management, where I think probably a lot more of the action is at. They get kind of told what to do by the board, but then they actually have to do it, and they actually have to execute it and create the applications or do whatever it is that they have to do. So the OCM exercises its powers and duties through an executive director. The executive director is appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. In general, the powers and duties of the executive director are to implement the day-to-day administration of the OCM and carry out any functions delegated to the executive director by the board. And they have the following powers: keep records of all licensees, registrants, and permit holders, inspect any premises where medical cannabis, adult use cannabis, or cannabinoid hemp is manufactured or sold, create application and reporting forms for the licenses. They do have their own powers for budget and fiscal matters for the OCM. And among having other members of the Office of Cannabis Management, they also appoint a deputy director for health and safety. So the Office of Cannabis Management's executive director is Chris Alexander. Again, if you remember a couple slides ago, I said that all of them have to be representative of New York, live in New York, and a little bit more preference was given to people who represent areas or races that were negatively impacted by the war on drugs. So Chris Alexander worked for the Drug Policy Alliance as counsel to New York State Senate, and he is the architect of the Start Smart NY campaign to end marijuana prohibition and the lead drafter of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, which was what made this all legal in our state. So he had a big part of that. It made sense to make him executive director. I don't have pictures of the rest of these people because the Office of Cannabis Management is much bigger than the board. So there's a lot of people involved. They have some different titles here, as you can see: policy director, chief of staff, director of administration, director of external affairs, chief equity officer, assistant counsel. So there's a lot of people here. And again, a lot of people that kind of have made their name known for being, trying to raise awareness of like the war on drugs and the impact on, Black people, Hispanic, Latino people, things like that. So a lot of those people are here. Even more people listed here too. So Jason Starr, he was actually the name I kind of pointed at 2 slides ago. He is the chief equity officer in the Office of Cannabis Management. He is responsible for overseeing the social and economic equity initiatives, and in addition to developing the social and economic equity plan. He is also tasked with establishing a public education program dedicated to providing communities that have been impacted by cannabis prohibition with information about how to obtain a license and the various support and resources that the OCM can provide. The MRTA, or Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, also established a state cannabis advisory board that's going to consist of 13 voting members with 7 appointments from the governor, 3 from the Senate, and 3 from the Assembly. There can also be some non-voting roles on this as well. But there's 2 main functions of the State Cannabis Advisory Board, and I do think that this is important. It is to advise and issue recommendations on the use of cannabis, whether that's medical or adult use, and also CBD, hemp in New York State, and then govern and administer the New York State Community Grants Reinvestment Fund. So this fund is like what part of the taxes go to. And so it's kind of like every time cannabis products are sold, some of those taxes go into this community grants reinvestment fund, and then this provides grants to nonprofits, qualified community-based organizations, local governments, and communities that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. So the State Cannabis Advisory Board is required to have statewide geographic representation that is balanced and diverse in its composition. And it's to include representation from individuals with expertise in public and behavioral health, substance use disorder treatment, effective rehabilitative treatment for adults and juveniles, homelessness and housing, economic development, environmental conservation, job training and placement, criminal justice, and drug policy. So again, just trying to create or have this like well-rounded, diverse group of people that help, if issues come up, or if it's decided, or maybe they're getting a lot of feedback that can't really think of any ideas other than people complaining that they want more than 3 ounces, on their person. But anyways, any kind of complaints or feedback that come back, this advisory board is meant to take that into consideration and then maybe give recommendations to the OCM and Cannabis Control Board. So getting into what's in the law, it's been the law for a year now, but there's still some things we can and can't do. So adults 21 years of age and older may possess up to 3 ounces of cannabis and 24 grams of concentrated cannabis, which is like vaporization oil or an edible. Cannabis and police searches. So the MRTA changes how the odor or presence of cannabis can be used to determine reasonable cause by law enforcement. No finding or determination of reasonable cause to believe a crime has been committed can be based solely on the combination of the odor of cannabis or burnt cannabis, the possession of cannabis in amounts in accordance with the state law, cash or currency present next to cannabis or multiple containers of cannabis, and planting or growing cannabis in accordance to state law. This law does not apply to an investigation of a person who operates a vehicle while under the influence of cannabis. Under such investigations, the odor of burnt cannabis shall not provide probable cause to search any area of a vehicle that is not readily accessible to the driver and reasonably likely to contain evidence relevant to the driver's condition. So anyways, if the police came by your house for another reason, if they pulled you over, basically the smell of cannabis is not enough to warrant a search. It's not enough to be a reasonable cause anymore. Of course, again, they can search what's accessible to the driver in that car and possibly find more. But I don't know. It does change it slightly of what police are going to do, and I'm not sure how well that's going to be implemented. But anyways, that is what is in the law. What's also in the law is home cultivation. So I will tell you right now that home cultivation is still technically illegal. What it says in the law is that people are not allowed to start growing the plants at home until a dispensary is set in that town and has its first sale. It's kind of a weird wording to me. I'm not sure why it would wait so long to do that. I think there is a difference though if you do have a medical card, because I was looking at their website and I believe, so if I pull that up, I believe there was an application for growing so that conditional. Thought that maybe there was an application for medical cannabis, but I don't see anything on that on their website right now. Yeah. This is what it says on their website right now. Yeah, you need, I forgot to put that on the slide, but you do need to be 21 years or older. But yeah, it's not allowed immediately. Home cultivation of cannabis plants may only be permitted after the Office of Cannabis Management issues regulations governing home cultivation of cannabis, which must be no later than 18 months after the first adult use retail sale. So I guess the timeline is just to give them time to come up with regulations, but it kind of sucks that it's giving them such a long time to do that. So anyways, when this is legal, it allows for 6 plants per person, all right, 3 mature plants and 3 immature plants for a maximum of 12 plants in a household. So that's if you have, 2 people living in that house, they can each have 6 plants. I did mention this earlier, but because there's now a certain amount allowed in possession, if you happen to have any criminal records of possession and it was like less than these, then those will get expunged. So, and then of course, new penalties had to be built because of the change in the law. So again, if you have more than 3 ounces of cannabis or more than 24 grams of concentrated cannabis, that's a fine. That's just unlawful possession. If you have more than 16 ounces of cannabis, it's a Class A misdemeanor. 5 pounds of cannabis, you start to get back into the felonies. Sorry about that. That's just possession of it. If they believe that you are going to sell it, or you did sell it and they've got proof of that, again, without a license, it's going to be the unlawful selling. It starts off with a fine, and then depending on the amounts, goes back up to a misdemeanor or felonies. There's also a law for smoking or vaporizing where it's prohibited, which is anywhere that smoking of tobacco is prohibited, and that's a $25 fine or up to 20 hours of community service. I don't have it up here, but there is also, if you remember on that last slide, it was 6 plants per people, maximum of 12 per household. If you did grow over that amount, that is a Class A misdemeanor and is punishable by up to 1 year of imprisonment and or a fine of up to $1,000. So, there's going to be laws of, they've okayed this amount, don't go over that, which makes sense. So I've mentioned this a few times, but really a big part of the Marijuana Regulation and Taxation Act, a major focus of it, is social and economic equity. And that is just because now that it's legal, they recognize just how many people were impacted by the war on drugs, by cannabis prohibition, and that under these new laws, they wouldn't have been treated the same way. They wouldn't have gotten the same fines, years of imprisonment, whatever it is. So there are individuals that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And so this act wants to incentivize participation in the new industry from those members of communities that were disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. So not only is there going to be an automatic expunges of individuals' past marijuana convictions, especially if they fit under the less than 3 ounces sort of thing. It's also going to invest 40% of the adult use cannabis tax revenue toward rebuilding communities harmed by the war on drugs. So 2 quotes directly from the website there, that the goal is to establish a robust social and economic equity program to actively encourage members from communities disproportionately impacted by the policies of prohibition to participate in the new industry. And it also encourages small businesses and farmers to participate in the cannabis industry with the creation of micro business, cooperative, and delivery license types. So what does this all mean? And how do you know if you fit as one of these applicants? Well, to start, I kind of already commented on this before, but the idea behind it was to generate significant new revenue and also make investments in community and people that were impacted by the war on drugs. Because again, if this law had been in place way back then, they wouldn't have gotten hit with the same consequences. It's also recognizing that existing laws have been ineffective in reducing or curbing marijuana use and instead have resulted in devastating collateral consequences, including mass incarceration and other complex generational trauma. Also, that existing marijuana laws have disproportionately impacted African Americans and Latinx communities, which is just so very true. So in New York, a social equity applicant is a person of color, a woman, a disabled veteran, a farmer in defined financial distress, and those persons from communities disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. Priority is given to those earning 80% or less of their county's median income and are from an area disproportionately impacted by cannabis laws, have high incarceration rates, or have minimum criminal conviction for marijuana related offense, or has a family member with such a conviction. So again, with the act, taking 40% of the tax revenue to be used for community grant reinvestment fund, it's also going to be used to help job placement, skills training, mental health and substance abuse, knowledge and skills. And it's also going to help these people apply for a license. So we'll get to it, but these licenses are pretty expensive. And I mean, again, I guess it makes sense. Not that I want to pay it, but the government's like, all these people are going to want to grow it. They're going to be paying the license the fee for it. We can make a lot of money off of this. But again, people that were impacted by all of these things we just talked about, the war on drugs, areas of high criminalization, that sort of thing, they might not be able to pay for the fee. So the social and economic equity is also going to cover the applications. And there might even be like funds to help them create jobs and businesses and that sort of thing. So the governor of New York has already announced $200 million marijuana fund to promote industry equity. Governor Hochul. So yeah, it's policies she's going to pursue this year and next. Promoting equity and economic justice in the cannabis industry is one of those objectives. While marijuana business licenses have yet to be approved since legalization was signed into law last year, the market stands to generate billions of dollars, and it's important to create opportunities for all New Yorkers, especially those from historically marginalized communities. So again, it helps cover license fees and tax revenue, licensing fees and tax revenues will seed the fund. And again, help give some grants to businesses that their members, fall under, who is a social and economic equity applicant. So since the taxes are doing all of this, and considering to hopefully make New York a bunch of money, let's talk about the tax part of it. So the MRTA established 3 taxes on adult use cannabis. Number 1, this is tax imposed on the distributor based on the milligrams of total THC in the product. So part of me, right, so this is kind of like thinking about it as a wholesale. This number 1 is like, all right, you've got the distributor in there. It's like if they bought in a product and now they're going to try to sell that product, whether it was in state or out of state. Okay. But the distributor, at this point of receiving it and then about to sell it, has to pay a tax on that product. And it's based on the type of product, and it's based on the milligrams of total THC in the product. So it could be in the form of edibles, concentrates, or cannabis flower. Edibles, 0.03. So like what, 3/300ths of a cent, right? Or 3/10. That's hundredths. Concentrates, 0.008. Cannabis flower, 0.005. All right, so for these other 2, so like say this is the store here, the distributor sells to the store. Oops. All right, and the distributor had to pay taxes on that. So that's going to jack up the price of your stuff too, because the distributor has to pay that tax. And then you're here at this store and you're trying to sell this product you brought in. All right, just gonna make a bunch of bottles. All right, each bottle, not only have you marked it up to make profit, but you also need to mark it up to cover the sales tax, because you're going to have 9% of the product's price going to the state and 4% of the product's price going to local, like your village, your town, municipalities. So this excise tax, I mean, it's not anything new, but again, I'm not like an expert in this, but they're commonly levied on like cigarettes, alcoholic beverages, soda, gasoline. And so since cannabis, I guess, kind of fits in with all that stuff, they're like, all right, let's do this. So state and local tax collections. So what that looks like. All right, so let's say you're a distributor, whether or not you're buying in state or out of state, you want to buy a pound of cannabis, that's 20% potency, which means 200 milligrams of total THC. Okay, also 1 pound is roughly 454 grams. Okay. So you want, the product is a flower, so that gives it that 0.005 per milligram. And so you've got this product you want to sell, you're wholesale selling it, sell to retail. All right, 0.005 times it by 200 milligrams, that's from up here, means that you are paying in tax $1 per gram. $1 per gram. So if you have a pound, 454 grams, that means you're paying $454, $1 per gram. Right? That's what they have to pay in taxes. So, you know, if to make a profit, right, they have to sell it to you at $2 a gram or $3, or, you know, and that's already doubling that price. So that's $900, $3 per gram, $1,300. All right, it's immediately jumping the price up. And then not only that, so the retailer, all right, let's just say they're going to sell it at $2 a gram because they're going to have to give up half of that to taxes. So retailer paid $900 for that. Now they have to mark it up, not only to cover the sales tax and the local tax, but to make a profit. So it's just, you know, it's just constantly increasing the amount. All right, another example, product is $50 and we're just looking at retail now. So it doesn't matter what it is. It's just that 9% state and the 9 or 4% local. So that means $4.50 goes to state, $2 to local, $43.50 to the retailer. And if it costs $20, then, you know, they're still making about 50% profit. That's quite a markup, you know, that's quite a markup. And when we can travel across the state lines to Massachusetts to buy it cheaper, or Vermont, you know, what's going to stop us? So it's something that's definitely been brought up a lot. And a lot of the kind of, there's a lot of groups I follow on Facebook, and one of them is one that actually kind of helps lobby and make some of these new laws. And so they were complaining about this on a Facebook page. A lot of people were noting that we have the lowest retail tax, you know, 9% to state, 4% to town is not that bad, but we have the second highest wholesale tax in the nation. So that means, and especially because it's based off of the potency, so like being, you know, that amount of money times it by milligrams of total THC, you know, it means that it could drive up New York's prices higher than those in other states. And it could mean an average retail of $70 per eighth of a flower, which is crazy. So, you know, having a sales tax in addition to the potency tax, you know, the overall tax rate for flowers could reach up to 30%, even to 55% for edibles. And that's compared to Massachusetts maximum of 20% rate. So, you know, the state obviously thought that they could make a lot of money off of this. Maybe they can, but the taxes are definitely going to hit people hard. So I don't know. I guess we'll see what happens with that. All right, not only that, but there was a vote sent out last year to all municipalities to have them vote on whether they would allow dispensaries or consumption sites or both. So it is, I wouldn't say that they were told, if the town or village prohibits cannabis dispensaries and or on-site consumption okay, so they had to get this all in by the end of 2021, in December 2021. I believe if they decide to opt out of both, then they will not receive those tax revenues related to the retail sale, that 4%. And I think that just reverts back to like the state tax or something. I'm not really sure. But it does mean that those local governments will not see any tax revenue from that. But they can opt in later. And the thought is that many will do that once they start to see what kind of money they can get from that. But anyways, this I believe is the most updated list. I mean, I got this a few months ago. So I only looked at the county of Schoharie, but the website is there that you can look up any county and then the municipality within that. So, and just showing you a few places because I couldn't fit everything on this slide. You know, you can see that like, because there's also Cobleskill Town and Cobleskill Village. All right, Cobleskill Town said yes to everything. Village just said dispensaries are fine. Bolton said no to both. Jefferson said no to both. So did Richmondville, just the town. Sharon Springs, Summit. So there's a number of towns and villages around here that opted out. Maybe they'll change their mind later on. Who knows? All right. So again, it's hard to say exactly what kind of industry we will have because we haven't quite gotten there yet. But there's like a number of reports out there, you know, that we could exceed 4.2 billion by 2027 or 300 million in annual tax revenue. Like, you know, I don't know. We'll see. But that's definitely optimistic and, you know, probably convincing some people to be a part of this industry. So again, you know, what's still being worked out? Honestly, when I made this PowerPoint like back in February, the licensing process was still a big blank. But on February 22nd, the governor did sign into law. I believe it's an amendment because it's -A, so I think it's an amendment that is called the Adult Use Conditional Cultivator License. And this authorizes eligible hemp growers to apply for a license to grow cannabis that will have over 0.3% THC for the upcoming adult use market. So to be eligible to apply, the hemp grower must have been authorized to grow hemp under ag and markets and under their hemp research pilot program. There's a number of other certain requirements that need to be met. I have that, I think. That's the second one, yeah. So, and not just any hemp, they need to have been growing CBD hemp for 2 of the last 4 years. Hold at least 51% or more of ownership. And they're allowed to grow up to 1 acre outdoors or 250 square feet in a greenhouse. There's not a whole lot more as far as what they have to do here. I am slightly surprised because back before adult use cannabis was legal, you know, if you were growing medical marijuana, it was like so regulated. You had to have barcodes on the pots of your plants and you had to scan it into the system and know exactly where it went, where it moved to, and at any time you had to, you know exactly where those plants were and could find them and that sort of thing. But it seems like there's not too much of that going on. Maybe it's up to the grower. I would definitely put some sort of security thing out there, I feel like. I don't know. But anyways, right now it's a non-refundable, $2,000 fee to get that conditional cultivator's license. And right now, the window for applying has been March 15th through June 30th. And the other article here that I thought was really interesting, somebody in the class sent this to me, Hannah, which was really interesting. Montgomery County, so not too far away. There is a grower there that got their that conditional cultivator license, which is really cool to see. So currently running a dairy farm. They did do hemp. And so they were able to get, the CBD, or sorry, the marijuana license, which was pretty cool. So if you want to read that article, it's up there. I might see if I can get the link to that video. That might be cool to see. The other part is, what they have hired on some of the people in the OCM to do, and that's the public health and safety part. As much as we can say people have been using this for years and years and years, we don't necessarily know the side effect of using marijuana with like all the approved drugs out there, or to say how much can you have smoked before you get behind the wheel of a car, things like that, operating motor vehicles, whatever it is. So they're still working on that part of it. The last thing I wanted to show you was this website. I'm not sure if it's like 100% up to date because I don't think it had everything for New York in there. But I thought it was a pretty cool website that you could click on the state to see their laws. So like if you click on New York, it did have this new stuff that less than 3 ounces, no penalty. What was it that I thought? There's something on here that I thought was wrong, but maybe can't remember what it was. So you can compare, because I'm not really going to talk about any other state, but each state could have their own laws, right? So like Michigan, it's up to 2.5 ounces, up to 10 ounces in the home. It's a little bit different. So each state is going to be different. Look at Massachusetts. Up to 1 ounce on yourself and up to 10 ounces in the home. So it's all a little bit different. So if you want to check that out, that is there on the PowerPoint. But that does end that, because like I said, there's not really a ton I can talk about. I can't even really show you what's on the license or the application for the license, because you have to make an account there, and I don't have one. So can't really show you. Can't really show you what's required of the license or applying for the license, but it doesn't really look like it's too crazy, honestly. They could have gone really overboard with it and like requesting the barcodes on the plants and stuff like that. So it could also just be that, it's the first time run, they're going to see how it works, kind of like it did with the hemp stuff, what worked, what didn't work, and they can figure that out. So with that, that ends my lectures for the week. Other than that, there's like some videos to look at. Probably gonna have a podcast or 2 up there again as well. And if you have any questions, please let me know. All right, have a great week. Thanks.